Hi folks, I'm Ted Green. I'm the founder member of the Ancient Tree Forum in the UK, and it's a group of people which are actually very passionate about all aspects of old trees. But when you talk about old trees were always in the past working trees. Every tree that survives today that is old actually had to work for its living. And this first picture shows you a scene which could have been taken 7,000 years ago or 7 minutes ago, because it is really agroforestry. We call it wood pasture, but the two are synonymous. Man started in wood pasture, this great savanna of land across Europe, which wasn't dense forest. So, if you like, wood pasture then became agroforestry. So the two run together, and it's so important. Cows, animals, trees, working trees. Every tree has to work for a living. The next picture is showing you actually an old oak pollard which came out of a river in Britain, and it's been carbon dated 3,400 years ago. And it's a pollard. In Britain we call them pollards, where the top is cut, and it was cut by man 3,400 years ago. And this is showing you one we found recently in a small wood in Britain. Exactly the same again. There's no difference. So history, that side of history, was perpetuated down the centuries. Nothing really changed. The trees were grown and selected for what their uses were, and they carried on being done right up to almost to the present day. Here are some sheep which have found a fallen limb, and they go straight in and eat the vegetation. This is where I think man got the idea of tree hay. And here, this is in Scotland, and you can see the ring of stones, which is where they kept the animals in the winter or at night. But the two trees are salix, and they're two pollards. And I'm sure the shepherds of that day knew that those trees could be used for medicine for the animals. And this is us starting new experiments, or trying to relearn or reinvent the wheel again in the UK. And this is Fraxinus, and we've cut some and hung them up to dry, as we thought was a traditional way of doing it. And there they are on a horizontal limb, and they're going to be left to dry and put into bundles. What we did was, in fact, we learned that don't leave them there too long, and they should be in a tight bundle. And of course, any farmer will tell you when you store hay, it has to be very tight. So we got it wrong. There we are, feeding the Exmoor ponies in the winter. And there you go, the cows have found it. And they can't wait to get in to feed on these. We call them faggots in Britain. Cows again eating them. And if you look at those cut branches there are probably 6-7 months old, and as you can see, some of them are still green. They've retained the greenness. Here we're starting to make new pollards. We think it's an essential part of our cultural history, which has been lost or being lost throughout Europe, is cutting trees for whatever resource we need. And in Britain, as I say, we call them pollards. So generally speaking, we want to cut them when probably they're the diameter of your thumb. And you can cut them straight across, or you can cut them where there's a fork to get what we call in Britain a bolling, or the beginnings of a bolling. This is maybe the third cut. It's all Fraxinus at the moment you're seeing, and look at the wood you can get from that bolling, or where that fist is. Here we are where they're really striking. We call it striking. They're flashing again, and there's a lot of new growth on those trees. And this is probably done on a 3 or 4 year rotation, depending on what they want the use is for. Hi folks, I'm with Alan, who's been managing some lovely ash trees and created a lot of pollards. And the cuts are being used to make tree hay, but I'd love to introduce Alan and get him to talk about how he's done them. Alan.
So we climbed up as high as we could, and we used an axe just to cut it just above any points, growth points, any splits, and they seem to have worked really well. Especially these young ones have gone really well, haven't they?
Yeah, for the second time. So these have been cut twice. If you could start with one about the diameter of, say, a broom handle, because we know that all the wood is sapwood, and the actual sapwood around the ring calluses over. But as Alan's pointed out, he's done them much, much older, and this one may be the second time, and we're going to look at another tree in a minute where it's probably anything up to 20 centimetres. But we are talking about ash, and we're never sure really about some of the other trees. So we're specific on ash, but I think the essence of this was, for me, was it was done with an axe, because that's what the old boys would have used. This is a tree which is probably, by its girth, just about the limit for when you wanted to start cutting. But what Alan has actually done, he's cut the tree to the form, meaning that he's gone up the two limbs, the fork, and cut 3 limbs, you can't see one, and a maximum of about 19 to 20 centimetres. The tree was then successfully in the fact that he put on lots of stems, and he's gone up another metre to 2 metres and cut the tree again. So in other words, if we want tree fodder now, we've got to go to that last 2 metres above the last polling. So I probably would not try to do another pollard on it, because it's getting very high, and we've got to think about the practical side of doing these things. But it's a brilliant tree and a brilliant example of what people can do to get tree hay, and equally at the same time, at some stage, he's going to get some limbs of a decent size which he can use for all sorts of things, fence posts, wood fuel, anything. So he's getting more than one use from this tree. Alan, this is one of the best examples I've ever seen of what we call today restoration pollarding or conservation pollarding, because it's a massive old ash tree which is well out of the rotation which it would have been in. Can you just describe what they actually did here, because it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it was a lovely old pollard, and it was so old it was starting to pull itself apart, and we got the tree surgeon to take the weight off of those long branches, and it's now sprouted and it's survived. We did that about 5 years ago.
Wow. So a serious example of what we want, how we want to manage our old trees. This is cultural history. It's a landscape tree, yes, but it's so much part of their culture. It dates right back to early man. Okay, we're just going to try and feed these cows with some ulmus. I mean, it's a bit early in the year to use it, but it's just an illustration of what they love. In fact, it's interesting, at the moment, one of them doesn't know what to do with it. But if I move up to these two individuals, they're going mad. So there you go. Now this is the sort of thing which would have happened in the Mediterranean, because in the Mediterranean there's less green vegetation in the summer. Whereas what we would do in the northern hemisphere is cut this, dry it, and use it in the winter when we haven't got much green vegetation. I've got two what we call faggots in Britain, and branches we cut mainly for ash, fraxinus and ulmus, and I think we've even used prunus and corylus. So there's a whole mixture of twigs we've got in here, and these were cut in July last year, and in a similar fashion to when you cut hay, you try and cut hay when all the nutrients and minerals and everything is up in the leaf, and so you cut it and trap them in, and the same applies to these. And what's interesting about these, this is now 7 or 8 months on, and they still smell nice. This is what gets me. It intrigues me that by trapping them in, we've actually also trapped in the smell. Please note, some of this, 8-9 months after we cut it, is still green. To me, it's almost like a feeding frenzy, and as if they've never eaten real food before. They're absolutely, one or two just haven't learned yet, but the rest are absolutely going mad. And again, interestingly, because they're more interested in this dried material than they were in the fresh, which we gave them a few seconds ago. And 2 of them in particular absolutely love it. So they've still got that hereditary gene bank. And sustainability to me means agroforestry and wood pasture, of course. I can't split the two, but it's a system which has probably been in practice since man stood up. And the one thing that it does provide is a biological continuity, because very little of it's changed. It's basically the same animals. Man's changed a bit, but it's the same. The whole system is basically the same. We may think we've improved upon it, but in actual fact, it's still sustainable.